Hello and welcome to K8sKoach, my StreamCast on Kubernetes and coaching. And I am thrilled today to have two wonderful guests, Robert Machorro and Brian Durden, who I know through my network at SUSE. And we're going to be talking about all things Kubernetes and KubeVirt and SUSE Virtualization and SUSECon, where the three of us will be at SUSECon this year, which is coming up on March 10th through the 14th. And we're going to all be there. And we're going to be talking about what we're going to be there for. And it's just a pleasure to have Brian and Roberto here today. Roberto, if I turn it over to you, would you mind introducing yourself and would you mind introducing your personal superpower, please?
Yes, hi everybody. My name is Roberto Machorro. I've been a software developer for a long time, but I've also dived into DevOps, and I've been working a lot with SUSE products, Rancher in particular, Harvester. So when Tom asked about my superpower, the first thing that came to my head is, well, I'm a strategic leader. I lead by example, and I point the way, but I sat with a question for a little bit, and I think that other people don't see me that way. I think other people see me as a problem solver. Just something comes up, I show up, and I'll sit with the problem until it's solved. And sometimes it takes a long time, sometimes it's instant. But I think that's my superpower. And I jump in no matter who it is. I think more of a servant leader. I will help anybody, even if it's way out of my range of normal, what I normally do.
Well, that's terrific. It reminds me, so, I describe it as a superhero power, right? And there's a number of examples in like the Marvel universe, like Mr. Fantastic. He was the leader of the Fantastic Four, and he personified, both that strategic leadership and the problem solving. And he was kind of a scientist, a mad scientist, if you will. Which brings me to Brian Durden. And so if you go to Brian Durden's LinkedIn profile, his title actually describes himself as a Kubernetes mad scientist, which I love. But Brian, would you mind, besides being a mad scientist, would you mind introducing yourself and also say what your superhero power might be, your personal superhero power?
Yeah, so my name's Brian Durden, and thanks, Tom, for giving me a chance to come on, because this kind of stuff's always fun. You say the mad scientist, and I was going to show you my business card. It actually says mad scientist on there. My job title. We just kind of try to take things like serious on our side sometimes, because everything over there is so serious. But no, if I had to say my superpower, what it was. Like if I was younger, I would say it was one thing, earlier in my career with less experience. But as I've gotten older and, put some wear on the tires, so to speak, I would say it's probably pattern recognition. And that may be a weird thing that is to be a superpower. But for me, I recognize patterns in software. So I'm a C++ developer and a C developer, like old school. I wrote FPGA drivers for real-time operating systems when I first got into the field, but I was dabbling in it as an intern and an associate engineer long before that. So I've been doing low-level development for probably over 30 years at this point, because I was a kid when I picked up C. But what happened over time is you start recognizing how things are put together, and you take formal pattern training, like they call them enterprise patterns and architecture and that kind of stuff. But as you go from one place in the stack, which may be very low level, to a higher level stack, like, with Kubernetes and application platforms, those same patterns are represented slightly differently, but they still emerge everywhere. So knowing those things and learning them over time has helped me recognize and have kind of a gut instinct when trying to make, design and architectural choices about building something, to build it in a way that makes it more friendly to automate, to make it more friendly to sustain, that kind of thing. I would say that's probably my best skill, but it's kind of hard to quantify. It's just one of those things you pick up over a long period of time.
Wow, that's a fabulous answer. I love it. I'm in my head, I'm trying to fight the urge not to dig into what we're going to be demoing and talking about at SUSECon. I think it's important for us to kind of introduce both of your organizations, and so because that pattern recognition and using the GitOps pattern and using it with SUSE virtualization is, is very powerful, right? But like you've applied that pattern recognition. I can see that what you just said to that kind of our session, right? And so,
Yes.
so like I said, I'm fighting the urge not to dig into what our session's about, but I'm kind of talking about it roundabout.
If you want to see the hardware, Tom, it's right
beautiful.
there in the
Wow.
background. That's a 3 ampere servers in a flyaway kit.
Wow.
128 cores a pop, ARM64. That's going to be a SUSECon.
If you don't mind, like you said, that we're going to be using that for SUSECon, but like, what are you using it that for your day to day with Rancher Government Solutions? How are you?
Well, I am the harvester SME at RGS, so I have a responsibility on the pre-sale side to ensure harvester is good to go for a lot of different use cases. So it's kind of all over on the federal side.
Mm-hmm.
So because of that, that means I need to both interface with customers and their needs. So how they do procurement, how they do operations, how they do deployments and that kind of thing. But then also hardware vendors as well. So the difference between, say, a Dell XR4000 and a HPE EL8000 may not seem much on the surface. They're kind of a similar footprint, but the way things automate and the way things work are slightly different. And kind of having those available, like, so hands-on to where I can actually, get my hands in it really helps. And the Next Computing folks and the Ampere folks kind of understood that, and they provided me a flyaway kit to noodle on and take to conferences and do testing and that kind of stuff.
And just to be clear, flyaway kit is a suitcase in a computing lab in a box that you can fly away on a plane with, in a hardened case, right? That's what you're.
Yeah, it's the size of like a carry-on suitcase. It has 2 panels, one on the front, one on the back, and you just got the servers, the fans pulling it through and blowing out the back. So the benefits of the Ampere platform is, they consume like way less wattage and power than a typical server does. So these 128 core Ampere servers are pulling like 40 or 50 watts at idle. If you compare that to a normal server, they're using double or triple that at the very least without the core density. So it's a pretty impressive piece of kit.
Sorry to jump in. What is the heat like that they emit?
Pretty low. It's it gets warmer in here because there's 3 of them running, and I've got other stuff running here too, but it's not bad. It's not that bad. If I had the XR4000 on, and it's a great piece of equipment as well, it just runs hotter, and the ARM64 stuff's just super efficient. It's mostly big heat sinks in there, so it weighs a little extra.
Before we go over to Roberto and his organization, could you just explain what Rancher Government Solutions is and what they do?
Yeah, so obviously with the name Rancher, we're tied into the whole Rancher ecosystem and Rancher Kubernetes suite of tools, but we focus on the government customer only. So we do not have a commercial arm whatsoever. So it's U.S. government-based, DoD, intelligence community, civilian, all the different government components. We sell to them. We work with them. They have unique requirements that are way outside of typical commercial norms. So we take those into account. We have a whole set of different types of best practices, different sets of reference architectures. Things like air gaps are super important. FIPS compliance is super important. Security controls. I don't know if you've heard of the term STIGs. But STIGs and those kind of things are very important, where in the commercial market, unless you're a bank or something similar, it's not quite on that high on the priority list. So,
that's terrific. Thank you, Brian. Roberto, would you mind introducing your organization, please?
Yes. So I work for Child Rescue Coalition, which is a nonprofit organization, and we assist law enforcement by rescuing children from sexual abuse. We do this by building technology, providing leads and education to law enforcement, and this is all done free of charge. Now, these tools help to identify, arrest, and prosecute child predators. Our technology is now used in over 100 countries. We have assisted with the arrest of over 16,000 predators, and that has led to the rescue of over 3,600 children. And we estimate that has helped prevent about 750,000 cases of abuse. And this last number, by the way, is just a really conservative estimate. And the way it works is we have crawlers all over the internet. Some parts well-known and some parts not so well-known, or at least not frequented by the average person. And our crawlers are basically observers that are sitting, watching the activity of offenders. We then take the data, verify it, analyze it, geolocate it to law enforcement jurisdictions, and then provide it to law enforcement through our portal. They go in, they get their leads, the evidence of crime, and that's their starting point for the actual enforcement. They do their due diligence at their end. And so far, our evidence has withstood the test of courts. We're having a success rate over 99%. And most importantly, by a lot, this has been a good tool to use to not have to put the victim as part of the trial and having the victim testify and relive the atrocity that they have already suffered.
Wow.
That's outstanding.
That's outstanding. It's such a tremendous mission, and thank you for your efforts. Truly, it's just so darn important. I'm a father of two young children, and as a father, as a kind of a new father, one of the things that really comes up for me, from a paternal sense, is just the need to support and protect. That really, it's a very strong feeling for me personally, and so I feel that for all children, that paternal need to protect all children, and so just once again, thank you. It's truly outstanding. May I ask, Roberto, how you're using, so we're using the terms interchangeably, Harvester and SUSE Virtualization. SUSE Virtualization is the new name for Harvester, what was once called Harvester, and so we're just using them interchangeably. But would you mind talking about, Roberto, how you've been using Harvester in your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I mentioned that we have crawlers all over the internet, these crawlers are running software that would normally be operated by a person, whether it's the operating system itself or the actual application that's connecting and interacting. This is software that is out there, and we automate it, but it has to live somewhere. So initially, we had a lot of machines. We had a rack filled with computers that were running an operating system, the application itself, and we would automate the process of the crawling on the application. This is quite a task, and we're a small team, and we relied on automating to make this easier on us. So now, instead of having a room full of servers, we now have a number of way smaller number of servers running SUSE virtualization with these applications running in virtual machines. And by doing that, we have been able to do a lot of automation. We can monitor through the API how these applications are running, the resources they're consuming. We're even able to do simple things as resetting the clock. The clock is such an important thing for what we do, because when we provide law enforcement evidence, the timing is important because they can trace that back to, say, a network provider or somebody that's actually sitting outside the house, and those times have to match. So something as simple as making sure that those clocks on all those virtual machines are running at the time that they're supposed to making sure the application itself is running. What happens when it dies? Some error. Some of these applications are more on the legacy side, so they're not meant to be running 24/7. We're able to restart it, automate the authentication process, and all kinds of things. There's a lot of magic that we do, and this has been a huge thing for us. Automation, it allows us to be a team of 20 when it's just 3 of us.
Wow.
Force multiplier. That's what I like to call it.
Yeah, me too. And so that's going to be, I think, probably the meatiest, if you will, section of this StreamCast will be on automation, right? And we'll be focused on automation. But Brian, did you have any particular use cases you wanted to mention about some of your customers, if you can share,
So again, I'm talking patterns here, and this is not to compare what I do with what Roberto does, because that's amazing. But being able to multiply your effectiveness at scale with a platform, whether it's virtual machines or containers, is something that automation enables you to do. And so when we have the right tools, we have the right products that allow us to do those things. It makes it to where you can sustain something and maintain it with far fewer people. And in my case, that's a big deal, because in the federal government, a lot of it, the way this works is typically you have somebody that comes on board, say an operations team, but it'll be a single person that joins the team, and they'll be there for about 2 years. After their 2 years is nearly up, they're now a senior member on the team. They understand intricate parts of it and how everything plugs together, but they've also had to train up new people that are coming in. And then after their 2 years are done, they're usually on to something else. And so you have a very rapid onboarding requirement, and then they're gone. So the thing that you're building has to be maintainable and, as I say, sustainable by somebody that wasn't the original builder of it. And that's actually a very hard thing to do when you get down to it. As a developer and as a lead in the past, creating and writing software at all different pieces of the stack, getting it to the last mile where you're actually in production, it's not easy. And then if you are this is one of the lessons you learn as a senior developer. You might think you're very clever and you can come up with some really cool software patterns that are like, oh, wow, I didn't know you could do that. That makes this one thing easier. But then when you have to explain it to the new guy or gal that's coming in behind you, how to maintain it, and maybe there's a bug in it, how are they going to do that? Well, you're going to get called a few years later and they're going to ask you to come fix it. And you're not going to remember, what you were doing. I can barely remember what I had for breakfast this morning. So good luck remembering what I was doing 2 years ago. So building things that avoid that, something that's more intuitive and follows specific patterns that everyone can kind of match and join, allows you to work with a smaller, leaner team that has less experience. And now my use cases are not nearly as noble or cool, I think, as what Roberto is doing, but I think the pattern still applies. It makes sense. In my case, service members may need to operate a system at scale out at a forward operating base or something like that, and they've got minimal staff. They don't have any internet access, so everything has to be done locally. So the whole getting out of their way with toilsome bits, like I like to call them. Toilsome is manually copy pasting, ClickOps stuff through a UI, stuff that takes up time that if it was automated, it would just save you a lot of effort and annoyance. So being able to automate most of that away frees up their time to go get trained, to go work on the things and put out those fires. When something's actually broke that requires some brain power, they can focus on that versus just having to maintain something. So that's probably, I think, a really good selling point, I think, for automation at all tiers. And I picked up a lot of the platform bits with my time at Pivotal. And Pivotal was almost automated on day one. Day zero, you go in with a canary, get it up and running, and day one, you're off to the races with automation. So a lot of those lessons kind of picked up, and teaching customers how to automate on day zero is kind of one of the things I work on. But they're starting to pick it up. But selling them the value on it when they see they don't need so much experience to maintain whatever it is they're building is just really neat.
So that's tremendous. I think I want to dig into the day one automation with GitOps now, but before we do, I do feel the need. We have to kind of define what is it about Harvester or SUSE Virtualization that's special, right? And so for me, this ability to do all these things with minimal staff is really special to Harvester, right? And why is that, right? And so that's the quintessential question, because we're standing on the shoulders of giants. We're leveraging Rancher as the platform. We're leveraging KubeVirt, which is a virtualization and Kubernetes interface, right? We're leveraging KVM, which is, people don't realize, but, it's been around for 10 plus years, and so KVM is kernel virtualization management. And so we're leveraging this stack of virtualization capabilities, but we're putting a Rancher or Kubernetes kind of face on front of it, right? And then I think that's a good segue into GitVops or GitHops, right? So GitOps, I'm gonna personally define is the management capability of using Git repos and then having an operator inside your Kubernetes cluster to sync with that Git repo and then make it so. So, for example, in some of the work that Brian's done, he's using Helm charts, he's using manifests, He's doing stuff with kubectl, right? And so he has a Git repo that has a manifest in its most simplest term, and it's a definition of a custom resource definition for a virtual machine. And then he's got this big virtual machine, and then the operator, we at SUSE we call it fleet. The operator syncs up with the Git repo and then makes it so, and it turns that manifest into a virtual machine in a harvester cluster. And the benefits of using this kind of modern management methodology are great, and that is something I wanted to kind of continue on with and discuss. But before we do, did you guys, either of you, this is a difficult question, but did either of you have like a light bulb automation moment in your career? And I'll give you a moment to think about it. For me, it was Puppet, right? If you guys remember Puppet, I got into Puppet in 2007. I said, you could manage thousands of computers, right, with Puppet. You're not just managing them one at a time, right? And so that was kind of the beginning of the cloud days in 2007. And so I said, oh, this is going to be huge. This is going to be amazing. And then, Puppet has turned into like Chef, and then Ansible today, and, SaltStack and all those other kind of tooling. But that was really my greatest automation personal moment. Did either of you guys have a kind of a greatest moment? And it's a difficult question, but feel free. Roberto, did you, by any chance?
Yeah, I thought of a whole bunch, but I think that one that I will probably always go back to is when I first started with Kubernetes and using kube control and trying to learn things. And that's actually around the same time that we picked up Rancher and started working with Rancher. And it just felt like, wow, I can take all these manifests and just blow up, build an entire infrastructure, and then just go and edit, how many instances of it I want to run, and boom, they redeploy again. And it's right there. Repeatability was amazing. And
it made you feel like a superhero, right?
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Well, that's a great answer. How about you, Brian? Did you ever have like an automation, like gestalt, that kind of funny word gestalt,
Well, like Roberto, there's a bunch of cases. But if I stretch all the way back into my career, when I was a lead C++ developer for like a small component on a system when I was working at a company a while back. I think this was in 2012, 2013, maybe. One of my colleagues that I worked with very closely, Michael Knapp, if you're listening, this is you, bro. But he showed me this thing called XSL transforms, XSLTs. So I had never seen them before. I was very familiar with XML, and it was always annoying to actually traipse just because XML is just, I hate it. Strongly typed language is not fun, but it's there, and it was very, it was everywhere. The Word docs, docx format uses XML under the hood. It's just a zip file with XML docs in it. So he showed me how he used it. And the way he used it is he would he created a template in Word and gave it to the hardware team that was implementing the FPGA that we were writing drivers for, and told them to fit the registers and the instructions and all the low-level stuff into very specific tabular formats with descriptions in various places. He got them to feed that information through and give a formal document, and wrote an XSL transform that broke that document down and generated automatic test code for them. So they could build a dynamic kernel module, a DKM, and load it onto the VME chassis and actually use it to test the FPGA flash that they had just done without him in the loop.
That's cool.
I thought that was incredible.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want a piece of that. And so I started learning XSLT, and it was a pain. But I used it to generate code as I moved on in my career while I was at this company. Once I got hired at Inmarsat, I got thrown into the world of JSON and then YAML, and that becomes significantly easier to traipse and do all kinds of templating and automation on. And then it was just off to the races at that point. But I always remember that first time, like I knew automation, bash scripts, but like the true power of like removing yourself from the loop and enabling somebody else to get something from you without you having to help them every single time was like a game changer. It was like a huge time saver. So I've been a huge automation proponent ever since.
Well, so with the GitOps, the GitVops, or the GitHops, modality. Do you see your customers, Brian, being able to leverage that benefit, where they could, define their virtual machines, they could define their configurations in a Git repo, and then kind of outsource it to these war fighters who are in a forward base somewhere, do you see that being a benefit, or do you see that being a possibility?
It's definitely already being done. We've got lots of customers that are doing that, not necessarily with war fighters, but the idea behind it is, and this goes back to what I mentioned before, working in the federal government space is very difficult, especially from a security and approval standpoint. So once you can approve a configuration of something, say a virtual machine that has X amount of stuff on it, being able to express it as configuration as code, i.e. a YAML file that defines the virtual machine spec, the harvester CRD, or it's technically a KubeVirt one. But you're defining the virtual machine and any other resources that may be tied to it. That becomes kind of set in stone. And that can be passed along with other artifacts like the specific VM image that is hardened and ready to go. Any other configuration that has to be placed in, that can all be basically become immutable and go through testing and approval and everything. And now that is approved and sent out. So when they get that, they have this understanding that what they are running is compliant already and approved by whatever leadership chain and approval authority needs to happen. Being able to automate that and express almost purely as configuration is just flat out amazing. It makes it significantly easier for them to do their job.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I think you brought up a very important expression, right? It's configuration as code. Roberto, do you have similar compliance issues that configuration as code could solve, or do you have anything in that space that just configuration as code is beneficial for?
Yeah, so I wanted, when Brian was mentioning about having an image that was ready to go, and it reminded me of SUSE Virtualization, where you have a set of images. So you have a collection of images that are ready to go, and that's how we operate. And when we need something, through the magic of Kubernetes and Rancher, we can just deploy that and exactly have it run the specifications that we want. The amount of memory, the amount of space, the disk space, and the networking, because networking is also a big component of what we do, and just have it ready to go. So there's all these specifications that are ready to launch. Click a button, and off we go. Or more like, we have an automated set of scripts that, based on conditions, they run those scripts and launch those solutions. Now, one thing I wanted to say is that, coming from a programmer's perspective, just like Brian, I started out doing a lot of scripting. So the scripting operated the API that's in both a Rancher and Harvester or SUSE Virtualization. Now we're switching over to Fleet, which is going to be doing a lot of replacing of our scripts and things like that. But this is, I think we're walking a similar path with different purposes, different specifications, and it's great.
It is great. It will remind me of this has got one of the configuration as code. One of the main benefits that people don't necessarily kind of think of. Compliance is a great one. Security, repeatability, right? Those are all really important ones. But is documentation, right? It's actually self-documenting, right? And the benefits of that, I think, in both of your universes would be great, right? It would be a great benefit. If you guys might remember, when for the show notes for this show, I socialized a Word document, and in it I had some other benefits. If you guys can pull that up and just kind of reflect on that for a second. But is there any others that really jump out at you? There's one last one I think that is a huge one, but I was just gonna see if either of you guys had any other comments about some real benefits of configuration as code or infrastructure as code.
So one of the things we're kind of tiptoeing around, and we've mentioned Kubernetes a few times here, is Kubernetes, like real power, is not running containers. It really isn't, because there's a lot of different ways to run containers. And prior to Kubernetes coming on the scene, there was dozens of different orchestrators out there. I worked for a company, Pivotal, that had one called Diego, and it was, it could do containers. They ran a little different. They weren't Docker containers, but it could run them. The difference, though, is the way Kubernetes describes everything. is the Kubernetes APIs and the way it schedules resources and such, and the way you can describe them that makes it so powerful. Like even custom resources can be described, so it's extensible in a very similar way to other resources. So you never have to break character or break your tool set. You don't need special tools to talk with this particular piece of Kubernetes and another special tool to talk with this piece. So it's kind of this one big API that allows you to describe every single resource using the same API and the same kind of schema, and just use YAML, which is nice and human readable. I know some people hate it and they prefer JSON, and I'm not one of those people. I love YAML. But with that, and why Harvester SUSE Virtualization is so powerful is because Harvester is Kubernetes and it runs on the bare metal. So now you've almost combined your application platform layer and your infrastructure layer into one unified whole, with the same kind of API to describe everything in it. So for me, automation, when I saw that, when I was first starting at RGS and picked up Harvester, my CTO had pointed it out to me in the interviews. I like immediately got it. And I was off to the races with the automation. It was just flat out insane. I just did want to say that. I don't think that was a specific example, but I think that's what we're trying to say here.
Yeah, Brian. I mean, I don't think I've ever heard anyone give voice to that before, exactly. And like,
Yeah.
I just found what you just said to be truly marvelous. It really spoke to me personally, and you know, you're standing on the shoulders of giants once again, right?
Yes.
The API and the YAML, and you know, and the functionality and the capabilities that that provides. I feel like that's basically the mic drop moment for the StreamCast today. I think you dropped the mic, and you know, you can walk on stage, and we're all done. I just feel like I think we can wrap it up after that. I think I would like to just socialize that our you know, that we have our presentation on GitOps at SUSECon on March 11th, I believe, at 3 p.m. And if you wanted to check out the rest of the SUSECon schedule and the SUSECon capabilities and everything that's going to be there, it's going to be a tremendous conference. Roberto's going to be there. He's going to be, I hope it's okay to say, Roberto, do you know that you're receiving an award? Is that okay to socialize, or is that private? Or okay, it's okay. Yeah, and so Roberto,
a few more weeks.
Yeah, so Roberto's personally receiving an award. We're going to be speaking on GitOps and GitHops and everything, and it's just been a tremendous pleasure today speaking with you both, and I truly look forward to our session, guys. It's amazing. Thank you. And so I'm going to stop the recording, and we look forward to seeing everyone at SUSECon in Orlando.
Cool. See y'all there.
Yeah, we'll see you there.
Do you guys have anything you wanted to socialize before I hit end recording? Or
Personally, I've already, I guess, kind of mentioned it. We're going to have the ARM64 kit there on stage. We're going to do some stuff live. This is not going to be a dog and pony show. This is the real deal. And then after, I'd love to nerd out with anybody that wants to come up and talk about it. We can peek and poke around. I have a whole network stack set up for this thing. This is not some little spit and glue thing. This is an enterprise ready deployment. So I would love to talk at length with anybody that's interested about it.
Right, amazing. How about you, Roberto? Did you have anything you wanted to socialize?
I got a couple of things. I wanted to walk back really quick to something that Brian said that really stuck in my head. And I said, yes, that's exactly it. Custom resources.
Yes.
Custom resources are fantastic. They're unlimited, untapped power right there. The other thing is tweaking. When you're working with Kubernetes, SUSE Virtualization, you deploy something, it didn't exactly work. Scale it back, tweak, boom, scale back, tweak, and until it's right and perfect.
Fail fast.
It is amazing.
Yes.
That right there, it's worth everything.
Oh yeah.
I would describe that as agility, right? That's one of the benefits of configuration as code, and the APIs, and then the KubeVirt, and then the KVM. This ability to fail fast is a true form of agility. That's a great point, Roberto. Thank you. Did you have anything you want to socialize, Roberto?
I'm very eager to meet everybody over there, and like Brian says, nerd out. I got questions for Brian, actually, RKE2 and stuff.
All right, let's do it.
What? But we can do that offline. But it's been a tremendous pleasure, everyone. Thank you very much for listening to our StreamCast, and we look forward.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Roberto. And I'm going to stop the recording.